Hello, welcome to the Japan America Society, State of Washington Women's Empowerment Series program, Diversity and Inclusion in Today's Corporate Environment. My name is Makiko Kaufland. I'm a board member and a chair of the Events Committee of the Japan America Society here in the state of Washington. My professional training is as an IP attorney at Christensen O'Connor Johnson Kindness, located in Seattle. Japan America Society is a nonprofit organization founded in 1923 with a mission to promote mutual understanding and friendship between the peoples of Japan and Washington State by providing a forum for the exchange of ideas and information. Our Women's Empowerment Program is a part of the Japan Currents Public Affairs Program of the National Association of Japan America Societies, NAJASS, with support from the Embassy of Japan. Now I'd like to introduce Peter Kelly, President of NAJASS, for a welcome remark.
Thank you, Makiko. I'm Peter Kelly from the National Association of Japan America Societies in Washington, D.C. There are 38 Japan America Societies located all around the United States. And this event tonight, Empowering Women in Japan and the U.S., is part of the Japan Currents series, which the National Association of Japan America Societies and the Embassy of Japan in Washington, D.C. are working in partnership to offer Japan America Societies the opportunity to present current events programs, public affairs programs on events, on issues of local interest in the U.S.-Japan relationship. Each of the host societies selects the theme, and tonight's is Empowering Women. We are very grateful to the speakers who are joining us tonight, especially Yasubuchi-san joining us from Japan. And we're very grateful to the Embassy of Japan in Washington, D.C. for helping us to offer this program to member Japan America Societies. As I said, there are 15 of these events taking place in different societies all across the country. In addition to this event tonight, there's another event taking place at the same time in Dallas-Fort Worth. And tomorrow there will be two events, two Japan Currents events, one in Denver, Colorado on the theme of smart mobility, and the other in your neighboring state of Oregon, hosted by the Japan America Society of Oregon, entitled Women in Leadership, Pathways to Success. Again, we thank the Embassy of Japan in Washington, D.C. and the speakers, as well as the Japan America Society of Washington, State of Washington, Dale Watanabe and Makiko Kaufland for all your work. I look forward to tonight's event.
Thank you, Peter. The promotion of the role of women is a significant policy priority for both the U.S. and Japan. Both countries are committed to furthering gender equality in the workplace and women's full participation in our societies by working together in various platforms. At today's event, we will hear three speakers with a variety of background to discuss diversity and inclusion in today's corporate environment and how we can empower women in the workforce. Today's event starts with presentations from each speaker, then moves on to a panel discussion. Please use the Q&A function to ask questions during the presentation. We will monitor the questions throughout the event and ask a question at the Q&A session. We want to thank today's event sponsor, Christensen O'Connor Johnson. Now I'm honored to introduce our keynote speaker today, Mr. Seiji Yasubuchi. Mr. Yasubuchi is a representative director and the president and chief executive officer of AXA Life Insurance Japan. Mr. Yasubuchi began his career at Mitsubishi Corporation in Japan and worked at the Tokyo, Sendai, and London offices. Later, Mr. Yasubuchi held the positions of Executive Director of Ripplewood Japan, Managing Director of UBS Securities Japan, Senior Vice President of GE Commercial Finance Asia, President and CEO of GE Capital Japan, and President of Visa Worldwide Japan. Mr. Yasubuchi holds a Bachelor of Art degree from Waseda University in Japan and an MBA from Harvard University. Mr. Yasubuchi has been a great advocate for diversity and inclusion, and since 2019, when he joined AXA, he has been actively promoting diversity and inclusion in the workforce through new programs for the employees of AXA. From people who know him very well, he's described as kind, curious, open-minded, always willing to learn, and a great mentor. The committee members for today's event had a chance to talk with him, and we soon learned that the statement is true. We feel so lucky and excited to hear and learn from Mr. Yasubuchi today about the diversity and inclusion and how to support the women, especially from the male standpoint, and also from the standpoint of leadership. Now, please welcome.
Thank you very much, Makiko-san. I'm very honored and happy to talk about this inclusion and diversity strategy for all of you today. Please go to the next page. Let me briefly talk about AXA, which is an important background for me as well. Next page, please. As many of you know, AXA is a French global insurance and asset management company and originally founded in 1817. So we are in business more than 200 years. And AXA is a name we rebranded in 1985, which is not a French word, which is a coin word, which you can pronounce correctly everywhere in the world. And AXA entered in Japan 1994 and acquired a company called Nichidan, which was originally founded in 1934 for SMEs. So in the US, AXA was known as AXA Equitable, but it was separated through an IPO in 2018. Next page, please. AXA is a purpose-driven company. So this is our purpose, the reason why we exist. And this broad statement, act for human progress by protecting what matters, is driving us. And this human, of course, includes customers, partners, communities, and more broadly about people. And the most important thing we protect is this planet Earth. So that's why we are very enthusiastic about the climate change agenda. So next page, please. As the introduction said, I joined AXA April 1st, 2019 as a new CEO from outside of the industry and first Japanese CEO in the past 20 years to AXA Japan. So for me, the first day was very important to set the culture, set the tone, what I'm aspiring to do. So next page, please. So this is what I did. First, on the first day, we had an executive committee meeting with all the executive members, 8 people there, and most of them, I met them first time. So I took 20 minutes to introduce myself and set my agenda. And in that speech, I said that I want to build open, flat, inclusive, and diverse workplace, and where each one of the employees can express their opinions and thoughts freely to realize one's best self and grow him or herself. And at the same time, I crafted a CEO message and sent this message to all employees on the same day. So this is a kind of starting point. But this is just a start because I need to do more. So next page, please. There were unfortunately still people who do not understand why we need diversity, why diversity is a strategic agenda. So I hold a conference, inclusion conference on 2019, and explained to all participants why we need diversity. Next page, please. And there are three reasons why we need. One is, of course, innovation. We need views and ideas which kind of combine to make a new ideas, which is innovation. So we need diversity for this purpose, important purpose. Company keep innovating is, I think it's for survival. And secondly, talents. We need talents, good talents from all different attributes. And those different attributes, people must feel very comfortable to work at AXA. And third is customer focus. Society is already very diverse. So we need to understand, we need to take that diversity into the company so that we can address the needs of diverse customers. So that is those three things. That's why it is strategic agenda, and it is for the long-term sustainability of a business. But I needed a little bit more, so I invited an academic there at the conference. Next page, please, to talk about what are we talking about diversity. And there are three different types of diversity we identified. And one is, of course, demographic diversity. It is the easiest way. It's like gender, age, or ethnic origin as a starting point. So it's visible diversity. And second is the task diversity. It is basically capabilities, experience, skills, qualifications, all those different things. And third is intraperson diversity, because one person can have a diversity. If he or she worked outside of the country or different culture or different industry and all those different experiences. So we need all those three diversities to realize so the three objectives of the diversity. So that is kind of really focusing on the and emphasizing on the strategic necessity of diversity so that people can think it as a business priority. So next page, please. So including some of the actions AXA already had, I emphasize inclusion and diversity action, and these are highlighted in the next page. Next page, please. In 6 months. So starting from what I said, day one, and we all, of course, measure and improve gender diversity. For example, we have 53% female population among our workforce, but 26% in terms of managers. So we need to improve more to promote more female talented people to managers and above. So that is measurement is necessary, and we are also disclose the numbers to the outside, and also actively hire and include people with disabilities. Diversity goes beyond gender, so we also care about people with disabilities, and also we're trying to build the LGBTQ friendly rules and practices at our companies. And also employees have different needs, so we support, and I personally support employee initiatives. And also who owns the diversity, because it's a strategic agenda, so I myself and management teams owns inclusion and diversity. And there are some examples. Next page, please. So these are some examples of books. On the left-hand side, people with disabilities, and the lady on the top left is completely blind, but she's very, very talented. She studied overseas, and she can manage event as an MC even when she cannot see. So very talented. And other disability are working in various different places of the company. And also on the right-hand side is we're sponsoring the blind soccer and athletes. And also we do have some workshop to really understand what disability means. And we participate in the Tokyo Rainbow Pride Parade, which is the biggest domestic LGBTQ promotion event. And of course, I was working at the front of this parade. And we did another inclusion conference last year, which was online to support working parents. Next page, please. And these are events-driven, but I also have an organizational approach to inclusion and diversity, because organizational support and systematic approach is very important. So through this People and Organization Review Committee, and Inclusion and Diversity Advisory Council, we regularly, which is quarterly, look at the talents and diversity and how inclusion and diversity is making progress within the company. And we do talent review, and on the bottom right-hand side is the employee resource group, which employees can come up with specific issues on minority or other social issues they care about, and they form a group, and the company can support. So it is about women, it is about working parents, elderly, and also LGBTQ, sign language, and cross-cultural experience, and neurodiversity. So that the employees' voluntary activities which company support. And this is not the end of the story, and I personally support and do other things. Next page, please. Next page, please. So to continue to build a culture for better inclusion and diversity, it is important for a society like Japan, which has a strong hierarchy historically. So how we can build a flat workplace with less and less hierarchy is an important agenda for me. So from day one, I promote by addressing by names, not by titles. In many Japanese companies, I am referred to as, hello, Mr. President, or Mr. CEO. That's not the case. So I ask people to call me Yasubuchi-san, so by name. So that is flatten and make the company less hierarchy. So I'm telling people many times, so I think most of the people now call me Yasubuchi-san, not president. And also open culture to come up with new ideas and opinions, and which will be evaluated and also promoted to actual actions. So if you have many ideas and propose ideas and nothing happens, people stop those ideas, promoting ideas. Ideas die immediately. So we are trying to pick up the ideas, and during the, for example, COVID-19, many ideas came. So we started to implement some of the good ideas, even it's a small idea, and so that people can see we are really listening and we are implementing what people want to do. So those are the kind of culture setting, which is a continuous effort myself. And next page, please. And I also go outside, grab all external opportunities, such as this wonderful seminar, to promote inclusion and diversity. So I had an opportunity to appear on the national TV about LGBTQ, and they were looking for some corporate executive ally who can talk about support activities and what barrier do we need to overcome. And there are not, unfortunately, there are not many people who can do that. So I appeared on the TV, and it was really a good opportunity to talk about, from the corporate CEO point of view, how diversity is important. And also appeared on the Huffington Post, a live program, which is an internet live program, which was interesting. It was new, and it's a 60-minute program with only 3 minutes commercial time, so 57 minutes. And diversity, and people pretend to know diversity, but people actually don't know. So those are the kind of external opportunities. And recently did a Clubhouse SNS on the LGBTQ and support of diversity. So I'm trying to use all the external opportunities to promote, and which our employees can also see, and broadly many people can see that what I'm doing. Next page, please. And also recommend books on inclusion and diversity. I have a regular contribution to a newspaper called Nikkei Sangyo, about 6 times a year. So I promote books. 3 of those 4 I introduce in the newspaper, so that people can see those books and people can see me recommending those books. And by the way, Wolfpack by Abby Wambach was a really good book, and many people liked it, as well as In the Company with Women by Glassman. So those, and in addition to that, next page, please. I also always looking at how diverse my environment is, and its diversity in what I'm doing. So we have a website, How to Walk 100-Year Life, and I do dialogue sessions with outside guests. And in this guest session, I of course need diversity, so I started this one from a female founder and chair of the board, UWC AXA Japan, Lin Kobayashi, and I also invited another friend of mine, so that people can see that diversity is in this website, and I'm doing what I'm talking about. So that those are the efforts. So finally, next page, please. It is starting from knowing. Knowledge is important, and best practices you should understand so that you can do that. And next is, of course, doing. Walk the talk. If you promote diversity, you really need to walk the talk to do things. But finally, what I'm trying to do is, I think, being. I want to be a really authentic inclusion and diversity leader, which has an influence over other corporate executives, other younger leaders, so that people will be more inclusive and diverse, which will sustain the longer term sustainability of the company and the society. So that's what I'm doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yasubuchi-san, for the very informative presentation and sharing your visions and strategies from a leadership point of view. My name is Kay Packard. I'm a board member of Japan-America Society and an event committee member. I'm a senior manager in the valuation and business analytics practice at BDO, specializing business valuation for financial reporting, tax reporting, and transaction purposes. Today, we have two more panelists, Colleen Fukui-Sketchley and Dina Glassman. Colleen has 25 years of experience building environment technology, as well as private sectors. She's currently the head of engagement and diversity at HashiCorp Corporation, provides direction and integrating inclusive practices throughout company and people processes. As a passionate advocate for equality, develop equitable and operational structures that are sustainable and scalable. She's a fourth generation Japanese born in Seattle, where she acts on non-profit boards that drive economic change in the world. Dina Glassman is a founder, career coach, and consultant at Glassman Coaching and Consulting, based in Portland, Oregon. She began her career as a litigation attorney at DLA Piper and Perkins Coie. Both are one of the largest international law firms. Dina later transitioned to in-house positions at Attorney Development Director and Attorney Career Coach while at Perkins Coie, with an emphasis on supporting attorneys in navigating their individual career paths at the firm. In 2016, Dina founded Glassman Coaching and Consulting and has been offering skillful career coaching to professionals seeking to maximize their success and fulfillment at work. Dina has coached more than 200 individual attorneys across seniority levels, geographic locations, and practice areas. She has a BA from Colgate University and JD from New York University School of Law. So first we ask Colleen to share her experience and views related to diversity and inclusion, and followed by Dina. Colleen?
Hi, everyone. Dale, I just want to let you know there may be an echo for the audience. I just got a text from somebody. So Kay's was a little bit hard to hear from what I understand. But I will keep going and keep moving along if you're okay with that. So thanks so much for the introduction and for inviting me. I was taking notes, copious notes during Mr. Yasubuchi's presentation. What he described is just exactly where the diversity and inclusion arena is going. So just to give you a little bit of background, I don't, for me, I guess, I feel like I've lived a bit of a sort of non-traditional upbringing in some ways, because most of my life has been surrounded by very strong, influential women. And so they paved the way for me. They took barriers out of their way. They brought me along. They opened doors, and I've had an opportunity to really be able to live the life that I want to live. And I'm super grateful for my village of people that have brought me to where I am. So I guess in speaking about just where diversity and inclusion is in this arena right now, it could not be more important. It is the topic in the United States specifically, and I think it's really sort of taking a turn throughout the world as people are looking at what is happening here in the United States around Black Lives Matter and around this social justice movement. It's like our second civil rights movement in a lot of ways. 25 years ago, nobody was talking about diversity and inclusion. So when I first started this work, was really back in 1995. There was nobody to benchmark with at that time. Nobody was really talking about this or really understood it to the level that people understood it today. And certainly the presentation you just saw goes to show just how far things have come. There is a business case behind this. 25 years ago, there might have been a couple of roles open for a role like mine at a director level or an executive level. I happened to pop onto LinkedIn just to see how many come up from an executive and director level positions of what I do for a living, of a D&I director. 8,644 in the United States. Literally a year ago, 5. So if that tells you anything about where we are going, what is important to companies, at least what they say is important. I think what Mr. Yasubuchi just mentioned is it's not just about talking about it. I think that is a start, right? And I think he has gone really the direction that everybody really needs to go, which is you take action. So lovely that people are they're calling it slacktivism. So it's people who throw things out onto Twitter and, we stand in solidarity with those kinds of things. What are the things that our companies doing behind the scenes to really live up to what they have said? So right now, companies are really working hard to demonstrate what they say they value. Before, they used to just say what they valued, but nobody held them accountable to demonstrating that. And all of a sudden, everybody's holding everybody accountable. So this is actually, for my field, really a good thing. I'm saddened that for us, we had to watch somebody be killed live on TV in order for people to understand the gravity of what certain populations in the United States have been facing for 400 years. So it's a really unusual time. It's a sad thing to have to, what brought us to here. But as far as where we're going to go, I think is really exciting. So that's sort of my take on the topic of women in corporate America. But I guess just to give you a little background, because Kay had mentioned that I worked in retail. I did work in retail for 22 years. So I did work at Nordstrom, which for many of you who don't know, it was 70% women, and it's probably fairly similar today as my guess. And so I've always been in the majority my entire career. And then right after I left Nordstrom, I did take a bit of a break. So anybody who's ever needed a break, I would highly recommend it for any women that have never had the opportunity. Definitely do it. Best decision ever made. But went after, the 20 months of taking a break and sort of figuring out who I am and so what, I went back into this work and jumped into the tech arena. And when you move from retail to tech, it is like night and day. It is like landing on Mars all of a sudden, where I became from majority to minority very quickly. The tech industry is probably one of the slowest areas to really move on this topic. I think some of it has to do with, graduation and definitely systemic societal issues in education and so many other things that come before even a work environment. So there are a lot of things at play. But here we are. So anyway, so moving into tech, it really is a different ball game. It's sort of what tech is trying to do right now and moving the needle on, especially for women. Women in technology is a huge topic of conversation, and I'm sad that the number hasn't moved quite as quickly as you would think it would. Unfortunately, just what COVID has really done, unfortunately, is really taken us back almost 30 years in the United States. Took us back 30 years, and it took us, 1 year to lose 30 years of progress when it comes to women in the workforce. And so it's kind of scary times, just to give you numbers, because that number, saying that really doesn't mean anything unless you put numbers to it. But just in January, right, just last month, 346,000 people vanished from the US workforce. 80% of those were women. So this has to do with the caregiving crisis that we have going on. Our homes have become schools and workplaces and restaurants. I don't know about you, cooking all day long. So, right, it's become like this place where it's becoming almost unreasonable, especially those with little kids. Those of you who have 2-year-olds running around at the same time, I don't know how you are doing this. I feel enormous amount of empathy, but that is why, right? It's going to be hard to balance moving forward. So it's a really interesting time, but I do think I am hopeful. In fact, I've never been more hopeful. As much as I just gave you like the doomsday scenario of all these terrible things that are happening, really, in the whole scheme of things, it's never been a more important topic. So I really appreciate the opportunity to come in and chat. And I'll let Dina go. I'll pass it to Dina.
Thank you so much, Colleen. It is such to be here with all of you. And Makiko, thank you in particular for inviting me to participate. I would like to start with just a little bit of personal story. Like many of you, I am an immigrant to the United States. My family came from Azerbaijan in the early 80s. As an only child, I held a lot of the hopes and dreams of my parents, and the great American dream of prosperity and education and success. And it turned out I liked school quite a bit. So I pursued an education, went to college, and ultimately went to law school, frankly, not knowing what I wanted to be when I grow up. And it felt like maybe I would figure that out in law school. I just sort of rolled along and ended up at a very large law firm in New York as a litigation associate. And for those of you who know the business of law, it is an extremely competitive, challenging business. And in my first couple of years of practice, I had my son, who is now 21 years old. And candidly, I never learned to deeply love the law. And what I loved most about being in a law firm were, frankly, a lot of the non-lawyer thing, the work of our diversity committee, the work of hiring. Because I loved working with people as much as I did, I got really involved. And the lawyering was certainly part of my job, but it was not what I loved most. So I was very, very fortunate in that my employer gave me, ultimately Perkins Coie, gave me the opportunity to pursue training and development and kind of stay within the law firm realm, but not as a practicing lawyer. I had an experience that I think might resonate for some of you out there. When I was leaving the practice of law, I remember a mentor of mine, a white male who was extremely kind and well-intentioned. And when I told him I was leaving the practice, he shared with me how happy he was for me because I was finally going to have the opportunity to be the kind of mother I had always wanted to be. the kind of mother that I was not able to be in his eyes as a practicing lawyer. And I will never forget, this conversation was now well over 15 years ago, and I will never forget it. He, from a very kind place, made the assumption that as a young woman in a competitive, difficult, challenging, stressful career, that I would not be able to integrate, and was not able to integrate, my role as a professional with my role as a mother. And I so appreciate the comment, Colleen, that you made about COVID, and I'm seeing that myself in my career. And unfortunately, that perspective that my colleague shared all those years ago comes from a place of bias. It comes from a place of unconscious bias on his part. He is not an ill-intentioned man, but in his lexicon, a woman who loves her family and who loves her children will not be able to integrate the challenges of lawyering at a very high level. And since I have left the practice of law and started my own business, I have coached well over 100 women, many women lawyers, who every day try to thread this experience of being a professional in a very challenging work environment, while also being a mother and being a chef and being a car service. And that, I think, is a tremendous challenge of diversity, equity, and inclusion. There was a professor at NYU Law whom some of you may know. His name is Kenji Yoshino. He is a Japanese American who has written a book called Covering. I think it is one of the most important books written in the last decade on the topic of equity and inclusion. And what Mr. Yoshino writes about is the extent to which we bring ourselves to work, but we don't bring our whole selves because it's too risky. If we share openly our identity as parents, our identity as maybe people with a chronic health condition, our sexual orientation, there will be assumptions drawn by our colleagues, by our managers, that will deprecate us in the workplace. But until we are able to bring that identity to the workplace and uncover, I think a lot of what we are seeing around the challenges of sustained progress around diversity will continue to suffer. There's so much well-meaning work being done in this area, yet I think one of the most important things that we as leaders can do is model uncovering. And I so appreciated the earlier comments today from people who are stepping into leadership in their organization and modeling and talking about difference. The work of diversity, and I know all of you out there know this, is incredibly slow and contemplative, and it is work that starts on an individual level. It is work that starts with you, and all of us have biases. All of us have stories of our experience that framed our point of view of the world. And we may have wonderful intentions, but unfortunately, some of our belief system serves to the detriment of some of our colleagues. So talking about diversity requires courage, and it cannot just be a conversation that is had by people who consider themselves diverse. What I learned in the law firm environment was a lot of times the work of diversity happens in a silo. We have great committees who are tasked to look at diversity, equity, and inclusion and solve and fix this problem. We are doing a terrific job generally with hiring. I think organizations have made huge progress. But yet, when we look at advancement, when we look at retention, our progress is incredibly slow. And I think part of that, again, goes back to the work of uncovering. It goes back to making diversity work everyone's work, the work of leaders, the work of CEOs, the work of strategy, not the work of a committee in the corner solving a problem. And it is difficult to talk about difference because you might make a mistake. You might put your foot in your mouth. You might say the wrong thing. And as competitive professionals, that is the last thing we want to do. So instead, we don't go there. We let people who should know better talk about those things. And what I hope is that we all take this on as our work. Initially, our individual work, and ultimately our work in our communities, in our workplaces. And we have a long way to go. And like Colleen, I am extremely hopeful and optimistic, and so grateful for leaders like Yasubuchi-san for advocating the way that you do, because it is leaders who are going to bring this conversation to the fore. It is leaders who are going to start to model uncovering. And I think there's a lot to hope for, but we sure have a lot of work to do. So thank you for inviting me to participate in this conversation. I can't imagine a more worthy topic. So thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much to all the panelists for sharing your journey and viewpoints related to today's topic, diversity and inclusion. And then again, it is so great to have all of you to hear your perspective from 3 different perspectives. So the next segment is a panel discussion, and we would like to ask some specific questions to go a little deeper. I see that all 3 of you are very passionate about this topic and went through your own journey, so I'm sure you have a lot more to say. So we have some questions, but there's no rules. Please feel free to speak up. And we also like to hear from the audience as well, so you can submit your questions and we will address your questions in the Q&A session. So as everybody mentioned, the diversity and inclusion issue is not just one big solution. It's a progress. It's evolving every day, every year. And all of you went through your own journey, but we wanted to know how your thoughts on diversity evolved throughout your career. Maybe I'll start with the Yasubuchi-san. You have developed a solid viewpoint from a leadership perspective to push forward this issue, but there is still a large gap between Japan and the US. So are there any specific events or experience that changed your view on diversity? Maybe coming to the US impact in your leadership style in some way?
Yeah, thanks, Kay. Yes, exactly. Because I went to the Harvard for 2 years, and that changed the view dramatically. Because that was the real first time I experienced myself to be minority in the class. There were 90 people in the class, and there are only 3 or 4 Asians. So being a minority, and I also worked well with that female talents in some of the group works, and realized that the kind of power of the diversity, because they can bring in many different experiences and also their viewpoints. So going through that 2 years at the Harvard Business School experience, and there was also a gay and lesbian community as well. And that was the kind of first time I was exposed to the gay and lesbian community. And one of my best friends married to a same-sex partner in California as well. So that all experiences kind of turned around myself and said, wow, world is different. And this is better. Is that my feeling? And that is the kind of start of my journey.
How about you, Dina and Colleen, maybe from the female perspective or female minority perspective? Or are there any incidents or events that kind of shifted your your viewpoints throughout your career?
So I'm happy to start. I will not tell you how old I am, but my my entire career, I have looked young, and in a hierarchical organization like a law firm, when you're a woman and you look as young as I once did, claiming a voice and speaking your experience. When you look at me, I am a white woman. And as I shared, I'm also an immigrant in this country. I'm a first generation college student. My parents socioeconomically did not have much. And it took me a very long time to gain the confidence and the courage to share my experience in the workplace, despite my level of seniority and my relative youth. And I have found, as I've gotten older and my hair has gotten grayer, it's been really empowering to speak about diversity and speak about my experience and share what I have learned. And there's a lot to learn. I think this work is never-ending work, but it's been a real shift for me as I have progressed in my career to not, and Yasubuchi-san, I so appreciated your comments during your presentation about the flat organization and wanting to hear people's ideas regardless of their title, regardless of their seniority. That has been a real shift in my life, in my career, as I've gone out on my own and started my own business as a business person. That sense of empowerment has really been tremendous as a shift as I have matured and stepped into this work more deeply.
Yeah, I would agree with what everybody said as well. I think that, things have really changed quite a bit. I don't know if I've ever had like a big aha moment. I would say when I moved into tech, I had a better understanding. In fact, I felt a little bit embarrassed coming into tech and not really understanding the gravity of the situation when it comes to women in the workplace, and particularly in tech. When you are a small percentage of the population, what happens? I learned a whole different set of vocabulary I had never heard. Also embarrassing as a woman to not have ever heard the term mansplaining before. For anybody who's ever heard that term or want to look it up, that is one thing to do. I had no idea these were things that really were happening in people's lives. And then I can think about sort of death by 1,000 paper cuts of having sort of these microaggressions happen over and over and over every single day for 50 years or what have you, just the weight of those kinds of things. So I have maybe a different set of level of empathy from a personal perspective. Before I understood it theoretically, philosophically, I've heard stories, but it's here, whereas now I could feel it a little bit more, and so it's really different. So that I would say is really where it is. I think right now, though, what we're seeing in the world is, I'm going to use a quote from my mom. I always quote my mom. She has a million of these, and I know she's on this call right now. She always says, when readiness meets opportunity. I think that there is a level right now of readiness in the United States that I've never seen. And even if it's fake readiness, I actually don't care what it is and what drives this phenomenon. But I do think that there's a level of readiness now that our responsibility, this is the way I take it, right, is that the door is open for us to bring this topic into discussion. Nobody will now be surprised or irritated by it. It's something everybody's holding leaders accountable for. I think for anybody who is thinking about things, we have to start sharing it with leadership. So my work is exactly what is what is required to remove bias from a company. Is you take apart your systems, and so most of my work is, just as an example, in the employee experience from before you even come to my company all the way through to exit. How do I make that experience as inclusive as possible for all different kinds of people, whether that's from a race and gender perspective, transgender perspective, people with disabilities, whatever it may be, but how do I make that entire process more inclusive so people feel that sense of belonging? Belonging has become really that topic of conversation that people are finally talking about. We used to just talk about the diversity part, which was really representation, right? That's all it is. Diversity, don't get it confused. It's not inclusion. Diversity is just about representation and the different kinds of people and what they come with. Inclusion is what you do with it. Right? That's what you do with the diversity, and how do you leverage it and capitalize on it and value it in a way that people will understand and feel that sense of belonging towards a company. So I think there's a bit of a shift right now where people are ready to do that kind of work.
That's very interesting to hear how, even though it's been a slow progress, finally it sounds like we are moving into the right direction to actually take an action. I mean, even with my own experience, I have worked mostly in the male-dominated industries, and we've been talking about this diversity and inclusion and women's empowerment for a long time. And why do we keep talking about it? So, and it seems like, in order to make an impact, unconscious bias, I think Dina also mentioned during her speech, may be the biggest obstacle. And from the leadership point of view, as well as from the individual's perspective, what can each person do or need to do in order to be more aware of unconscious bias and to overcome the bias?
I could speak to that just quickly, and I'm sure others will have better things to say. I think for me, I'm always talking about unconscious bias or subconscious bias, whatever people want to call it. It's not always about, it's not like overcoming it or necessarily trying to get rid of our biases, right? We are the sum of our experiences, and so it's very difficult, right? I mean, all of us, if you grew up in a certain decade, you saw the same TV shows, you saw the same commercials, you saw the same movies, read the same books, went to the same kinds of schools. We are all biased based on that environment. It's knowing when your bias is coming into play. That's the part that we have to get better at, of understanding ourselves well enough to know I am very clear about what my biases are, but I look for them all the time. And so, like, even in a hiring capacity, right? I could tell I was leaning in towards another Asian woman. I had 4 candidates. They couldn't be more different from each other. I was leaning in towards the Asian woman. I felt like, wow, we clicked really easily. I didn't know if it was similarity bias coming into play. I had 2 more people interview them. I was like, I can't tell now. I can't tell if it's my bias or if she's actually the best candidate. So I just push it to somebody else, right? Go check that for me. But it is being open about those kinds of things and putting mitigating measures in place that can help us get better at things like that.
I couldn't agree more with those comments. And just to supplement a bit, I think there's an enormous amount of shame when we talk about bias. Bias is a bad word. Somehow the assumption is that we shouldn't have biases. And if you are an evolved person who loves your neighbor, then you won't have biases. And that is just plainly false. just by virtue of being human on this planet, living in the decade that we lived, in the body that we live in, coming from the country that we came from, it necessarily means that we have bias. I think the most important work around unconscious bias is to acknowledge and accept that it is something, it's the water we swim in. And the water we swim in is not the same for every one of us. So your bias may not be my bias, but that is not to say that I don't have any biases. And it doesn't matter that I'm a diversity professional. I still have many, and some I haven't come to know. So I think in the same way as talking about more broadly equity and inclusion, we have to remember that, and this is maybe cliche to say, but we have more in common than we have difference. And we all have felt excluded. Some of us have felt excluded because of our race, because of our gender, because of our disability, because of our sexual orientation. And white men sitting in corner offices have felt excluded too. And we need to bring all of us into this conversation to then do the hard work that Colleen was referring to, where we can actually start mitigation. Before you can start to mitigate, you have to have awareness and an acceptance that bias exists. So, yeah.
What about you?
I'm on mute. Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I completely agree. And I want to use a word like mental model. We all of us have a different mental model because of background. So the mental model is driving us, and awareness that we have specific mental model is very important for everyone. And that creates, in some case, bias, in some case, preferences. So that comes from something we already have experience in us. That kind of recognition is very important. And if we recognize that, as Colleen said, we can systematically mitigate it. For example, if you hire someone, you always have a diversity in candidates. At the candidates level, how many women do we have? How many men? Why we have only 4 candidates, all men? That kind of question should be asked so that people are, okay, so we can do that. So that will, and one good example is like the orchestra is doing blind audition without seeing the candidate, but just listening to the musical play and choose artist, and that increased female participation a lot. So we are biased by what we see. So how we can systematically change it is, I think, my approach as a kind of corporate person.
Very good point. I mean, especially in Japan, it's such a homogeneous society, and the old traditions still remain. And from maybe this is a question for you, you know, from a leadership perspective, are there any types of education or trainings that can make a progress in that area?
Yeah. We are talking about unconscious bias. So we did the unconscious bias training with all managers so that people are aware that people have certain mindset that, and we also have a group level training that teaches like mental model. And that says, when you think you are absolutely certain, you have to question yourself. Because that something is coming in, this cannot be this way, or something we are so have strong conviction must have a reason or must have some background. So asking, it's a kind of meta recognition type of thing, asking yourself always the question, why do I think so? Why do I like this? Is there any reason behind that? I must ask myself. So that type of like a discussion is very important. So unconscious bias training is the first step for our managers.
Do you think that kind of mentality is becoming more popular in Japan?
I am hoping and trying to promote that mentality, but unfortunately there are still very much stereotype driven and like male dominant type of culture is still there, of course. And unfortunately, we recently witnessed from one of the very famous guy leading the Olympics. And that was inexcusable to my point, which I said in my Twitter. And that is not one isolated incident. We have a lot of more Mori-san everywhere.
Yeah, I think that was one of the comments we received from the audience as well regarding Mr. Mori's comments. So I sustain my opinion about that, but I personally think at least it brought up a lot of conversations in the social medias and main medias, and at least we're talking about it. I think that alone is a progress. Okay, so I think we mentioned a little bit about the COVID, and 2020 was definitely a challenging year for all of us, and it literally changed our lives. And we also experienced some social movements in the US, such as Black Lives Matter. But how do you think the pandemic affected the progress of the diversity and inclusion, both in Japan and the US? And how do you ensure to continue putting these initiatives forward in our new normal environment, especially in a remote work situations, or roles of your household versus employees, and understand everybody's needs?
Shall I start? So yeah. And well, unfortunately, I think like already mentioned, many women lost jobs in Japan as well. But there is bipolar thing, because in the regular employees of companies, in listed companies and big companies, there is still ongoing movement to increase women participation and representation. And this came from one part is a strong push from the investors. And ESG type of investment is growing very rapidly, so that listed companies cannot really ignore that. So that includes S part, social part, including the female representation. So if you don't have female on your board, the investors will definitely ask. So that is one part. I think that still go on and should progress. The other part you mentioned is the big difficulty is for working women in Japan is too much house chore on women, traditionally and currently. So what I'm doing is that I'm talking to our managers and employees to kind of really recommend them to have an open discussion within the family, kind of coming up with a new agreement within the family, how to operate in this working from home environment. What should be done by whom, and who is the main worker in that family decides how the house chores should be allocated. So I'm recommending to that, and I'm doing myself with my wife. Every morning I talk with her, each schedule showing, agreeing is what I do and what she does. So that type of thing is I'm promoting within the company, so that that will be a smoother transition to that. And one, and two is making work rules much more flexible. Mm-hmm. You can stay home all week, or you can come to office, and it's your choice. So give more choice to employees so that they can choose place to work and how to work, how long they work. So that type of more flexibility and more choice on the employee side will relax a little bit of the problem, is what I'm doing right now. But I know that I need to do more. So I want to hear from others, so what I can do more.
Yeah, I think that's great. And from a company perspective, that's definitely, the way to go. And even in your personal life, for that matter, I'm sure that that's working out great to have that conversation. I think it's probably unusual in Japan to be able to talk about the stresses of home and the responsibilities that we have. Just so for myself, I mean, I will tell you there's, one thing about companies being flexible that's really important. And I think companies need to do a better job of making sure that the women of the organization are feeling supported in whatever way they need to be. My company is fully remote and has been built that way from the beginning. We have unlimited flexible time off, right? These kinds of things are more typical now. So I could do whatever I want whenever I need to do it. I can go to a dentist appointment. I can run him to run my son to go play places and those kinds of things. But I think also, though, I mean, especially for the women who might be on this call right now, is, I think this is also the time where we need to ask for what we want and what we need. And I think this is also, I think this is a two-way street. We may not get asked, so you might have to do the asking and sharing some things, which is difficult. And it could be, there's a bit of shame with that. I know that for myself, a couple of years ago, my job is about a, 50 to 60 hour a week kind of a role. And it got to the point where literally I was like, frantic. My husband comes to me and he goes, oh my God, what is happening right now? What do you need? What do you need? And I said, it just came out so fast, but I was like, I need you to quit your job. And then I heard myself say it. It's like you say it and then you hear yourself say it. And you're like, I said, that was pretty drastic. And he said, okay. And 2 weeks later, he stopped working. And has been my full-time partner in crime he's bringing me food all day and coffee, to that level, plus taking care of my son and all of the things that he's doing while I am working. And so part of it is, perhaps creating that relationship with your partner to have that level of flexibility to say those kinds of things like, I can't do this is basically what it came down to for me. I know that that's not a luxury everybody has. It's certainly a difficult thing to do, but it is an option. So,
to add a bit more, I think COVID obviously has been devastating for so many reasons. There are, though, two elements that I think have come out of the pandemic and the necessity to work from home that are actually really hopeful. As someone who has spent her career inside of big law, that was not an environment where remote work was an option. It was believed that you couldn't do your work at a high level as a lawyer if you were not physically in the office. And many, many people in leadership positions, again, very well-meaning people who had this bias, believed that if I didn't see you, then you must not be contributing. And overnight, that has changed. And here we are, all of us, and we've been working mightily from home for a year across every industry on the planet. So that argument, which I think does adversely impact women, because so many of us do carry more of a burden when it comes to childcare and other responsibilities. That impact, I think, will be reduced as workplaces post-COVID accept and continue offering the flexibility that so many have had to offer through COVID. The other thing that I think has been really powerful is that we have all had to uncover, because here we are, we're sitting in our houses, and this identity that we have, whatever that identity may be, we're taking care of aging parents, we have dogs barking in the background, we're mothers, we're fathers. All of that is now more apparent. So that line between ourselves as employees and ourselves as full-throated humans has integrated. And I think there's something really amazing in that integration, that if we could just harness that and empower each other to maintain that in our workplace when things go back to whatever the new normal will be, I think it will have huge impact on inclusion and huge impact on equity.
Yeah, and it's also good for like managers to really understand the diversity of the team members, family, society, where he or she lives, impact, what kind of house and what kind of IT environment your team member has. So all of a sudden managers start understanding their team members as human. So that is, I think, big advancement of understanding, which we should promote, and that will never go back to before.
I think the one thing too that I'm seeing when it comes to seeing sort of the whole person, of a whole person, right? We get to see their personal. I get to meet spouses and boyfriends and pets and kids that I would have never have met otherwise. It's been lovely. So there are some real upsides to this. It also, I mean, I guess where I'm seeing a little bit of where things are not looking great for certain populations are multi-generational families. If you think about certain families that have multi-generations and the houses that they live in, that working from home with all of these people is just not conducive. We're seeing isolation for a younger demographic who live by themselves. And right, so we're trying to now, do a better job of meeting people where they are. Instead of them trying, usually you're trying to create policies and then the employees meet you where you are. Well, I just don't think that that's realistic anymore. I just think we have to be better at customizing our approach, not making everything equal, but equitable. And not getting confused about what those two things mean, because it's not about equality, it's about giving people what they need, not giving everybody the same thing. So yeah, I think there's some complexities to this that's been interesting. And I think to answer maybe one of the questions I saw, Lori Matsukawa posted one about, are women working from home, is that a good thing? I think it is, actually. I think for a lot of folks, working from home really works for them, right? You are managing a whole household of children. This is the way to go. And now companies are so flexible about when you're working, right? So we've been really sort of open about making sure people work when you need to work. And if that is at 2 a.m. because your whole life is around an 18-month-old all day, so be it. Okay. Do what you got to do. Right. So we had to sort of normalize some getting emails in the middle of the night. Right. Before it used to be like, you really need to cut it off because people feel burdened when they get emails at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock at night. Sorry, too bad. This is now meeting people where they are, and we need to be open to when people are available to work. And that is working around their lives, but their lives should come first. So this is, again, where companies are going to really need to shift how they think about things, their policies. Why do we hang on to things for dear life, right? Why can't we just loosen some things up here to meet the moment?
Yeah, I think you mentioned earlier that sometimes you have to ask what you want, but it comes to how women get perceived versus men when essentially you're asking the same thing. And maybe, I guess this is a question for Colleen and Dina. How can women ask and get what they want or what works for them without being penalized in some way?
That is a tough question.
I was hoping you'd have an answer. I was like, I'm waiting.
I can't wait. What is the answer?
What is she going to say? I'll write it down.
I think ultimately, we as women can't control the response. What we can control is our voice and what we ask for. You can hope that you will be heard and you will be seen and that your requests will be understood. and you cannot ultimately control the response of your supervisor, your manager, your broader organization. I think, unfortunately, what has happened for so many years is we have assumed that the response was going to be negative, that the assumptions were going to be unfavorable, so we have chosen not to ask. And I think what is happening now is we are going to ask, and you may not agree, and then we will do something else. Because we are, I think, women and perhaps everyone, I hope everyone, is stepping into more empowerment now than ever. Because this moment, I think, has brought the meaning of life so much more clearly to all of us. We are all less afraid because, frankly, COVID has it's hurt and taken so many lives, and it's all become so obvious how short this is that we're not willing to wait. And I think that ultimately that is for the good. And companies are going to be asked things that they haven't been asked before. And some of them are going to rise and some of them are not. But I think people are feeling empowered to use their voice. And that is a good thing. And as long as we have leaders like Yasubuchi-san and Colleen inside organizations doing this work, there's a lot of hope.
Yeah, I do think this is when, we get to choose. You get to choose where to work, right? You get to choose what you do for a living. You actually get to choose what you make if you're really good at negotiations. You get to choose what kind of a leader that you want to be. There is a lot of choice and power that is in your control. Don't work at places that are oppressive. Okay, I mean, every time sort of somebody leaves the company, it costs them an enormous amount of money. So you may think that, it's kind of like when you put your finger in water and you take it out and the water just goes right back, right? It just fills the hole that you just touched, right? It's not like that anymore. The cost of losing an employee right now, people are really paying attention to. And so when they're seeing a mass exodus of women, right, and you think about how much it's going to cost to replace them, people are doing everything they can to retain you. So again, this is the time to ask for what you need, mostly because they can't lose you right now. Right? I mean, this is the thing that it's a tough time. And so it's just, knowing who you are, knowing what you want, spending time thinking about that, and then not taking anything less than that, right? And we get to choose, make the right choices for us in the best environment. So choose an environment that is already talking about this. I think that Yasubuchi-san is going to have a number of applications perhaps from after this, because I'm sure you see him talking about, I'm going to sign up for that. Yes, I want to work for a company that does that and has that feeling. And even if they don't do it 100% right 100% of the time, it's so not even important. It's the effort and the sincerity and the authenticity that he is bringing to the organization that will make change. It will. And those that don't like it will leave. And that is okay. You have to you've got to stick with your line. And I think that he's such a great example of what it takes, and it's drawing a line in the sand and saying, no more. This is what we're doing, and if you don't like it, it's okay, but you can't work here anymore. So, yeah.
Yeah, and actually, I hear that question a lot from people in Japan, and how I can make my voice heard. So this may be very Japanese, but I recommend to people to don't do it by yourself. At least form a small group of people who think the same way, and come up with like group recommendation and pick 3 people you think that voices will be heard, and go one by one, and some of your boss or some of the other bosses. And if none of them hear what you say, I think it is a time to think about, leaving the job to find a place for you.
Great. I think we're running out of time. So this is our last question. So based on your experience and the whole journey that you have been through, can you please give us a few takeaways to the audience as an advice so that we can become a better diversity and inclusion ambassador, and we don't have to talk about this forever.
Let me start. I have two things. One is check what you read, listen, and watch. And are they diverse enough? Is a question I'm asking myself, and you should ask yourself. The books you read, are authors and creators include enough women, enough diversity? Because what you read, what you listen, what you watch makes you. So I think choose diverse materials, diverse authors, diverse providers, and so on. Second is, in particular for, I think, Japanese people, and in particular for the COVID-19 situation, participate and help NPOs, NGOs, which support minority in the society or socially unprivileged people, so that you can hear different voices, you can hear different views. So those are kind of two recommendations I have, and which I'm doing myself.
I would say that the most important thing to keep in mind is that this is a long road. We've been on it for a long time already, and we're going to be on it for many, many years ahead. And to buckle up for that, to not expect that one training, one program, one event, one book, one article is going to fix this, that this is life's work. And what is really exciting is that it's time, and there are a lot of people that are rolling up their sleeves right now and getting to do this work. There's a lot of work to do. So I know a lot of us are impatient because it's been a long time and things have not improved as much as we wish they had. And we need to be patient. We need to be patient with each other. We need to be patient with ourselves, and do this work over many weeks and many months and many years, and to have it part of our diet. Diversity is strategy. Diversity is business. And it's not diversity as the key term, it's inclusion. I think taking that long view is really important.
Yep, I was going to say very similarly. It's amazing we didn't actually talk about this, but yeah, this is not a topic you never arrive. There's no exit strategy. There's no end. There's no, here's what good looks like. Check the box. We're all done. As soon as you get close to that end, the finish line moves. And that's why I've been doing this for 26 years this year, is because that finish line continues to move. And so it's going to be a long road before we do it. And I think that the more we all sort of commit to doing something differently, because honestly, what got us to here isn't going to get us to the next place of being more inclusive and diverse. It's just not. But without each and every person actually committing to doing something differently, it's only going to stay the same. So it's wonderful that we could all talk about it and we can get, all this awareness in our brain. But if we don't do one thing differently, then we have what we have, and we'll continue to have this conversation for the next 50 years. And so I'm saying this because I'm actually really working on this regularly. I do something different now at a minimum once a day, something that feels uncomfortable, something that differently than I've ever done it in my work, because honestly, my work only got us to here. Right. So even though I've been doing this work a long time, I consider it sort of a big failure in some ways, because we haven't fixed this problem, and I've been doing this work this whole time. Right. So what do I need to do differently, even in the work that I'm doing? How can I do it more unapologetically, but nicely? And then honestly, it's about just thinking about everything with an equity lens. So if you feel good about something, think about why that is. Think about who won't feel good about it. If there's something, you have a decision to make, you make products, you are in charge of something, it's always thinking about who is it made for, who is it made with or without. right? It's just thinking about, okay, who did I not ask? Who is this going to disproportionately affect? If I say this, how is that going to land on these people, right? So that's sort of the work that I do, but I know if everybody was sort of moving in that direction to be able to check themselves and understand their biases more, we'll make great progress.
Great. Thank you so much. This has been a great conversation, and I hope everybody learned something from this session. I think we addressed all the questions that came up through the comments. So again, thank you so much for your time and participating, and I am going to pass it on to Masami.
Thank you, Kei-san. Thank you, Kei-san. My name is Masami Katayama. I'm a board member of Japan America Society from Starbucks in Seattle. As we come to the end of the session, first and foremost, I would like to show a huge appreciation for today's great speakers, Yasubuchi-san, Colleen, and Dina, for generously spending time and also sharing experience, knowledge, and insights. It was so great to hear even how vulnerable each leader could be and still talk about those stories so openly. And all the leaders' talk really assured us that diversity and inclusion is indeed extremely important and needed from strategic perspective at the current corporate environment. And nurturing of this diversity and inclusion is a concept of journey that's slow and long and a lot of progress. And that requires full commitment and accountability from senior leaders like today's great speakers. And also, in spite of the fact that there are many challenges arise from the COVID, we heard a lot of passions and also hope about this future of diversity and inclusion. That to me is really empowering, not just for the leaders, but also each of us to be authentic and be able to share and express our opinions, which is what Dina talking about, uncovering ourselves, Colleen talking about ask for what we need, there are more choices available, that things are more in control. All these words are so practical that each of us can really empower ourselves to take every day a few steps in our daily life. So we sincerely hope that today's lessons we learned from the sessions are also useful for your continued journey of diversity and inclusion. Now, let me spend a few of administrative items. First of all, we'll be sharing the survey to receive your feedback. We appreciate your cooperation to make our future events even better and more meaningful. Secondly, we have a couple of slides regarding our future event. The first one we like to introduce is regarding a virtual workshop called Japan in the Schools. This is a series of workshops that we provide from Japanese culture preparing rebuilding for Japan, we are welcoming some of the great speakers who are actually involved in the Tomodachi operation back in 2011. Next page, please. And lastly, Japan-America Society is planning to have an annual meeting. This is a great venue for the community to get together, network, and learn each other, as well as learn from the speakers. We'll have not only a board meeting, but also second half will be open to non-members as a guest for the opportunity. Next page, please. This is the end of the page of the session. And again, we thank all the sponsors for supporting today's event. And thank you, all of you, to participating today's event. And we look forward to seeing you again at our future events. And this, I hope you have a wonderful evening in the US, as well as wonderful day in Japan. Once again, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you very much.